everything that happened to me in 2025. 2025 was a year of clarity for me. Seeing myself clearly, seeing patterns clearly, seeing God's hand in my life more clear than ever before. I heard somebody say once, you have to see it before you see it or you'll never see it. Well, in 2025, I saw it. The good, the bad, the confusing, and the funny mess that was my life in 2025. Let's get into it. If you are someone who is trying to actually live their life in the midst of all the chaos and you enjoy fashion, you enjoy trying new things, take a moment to subscribe to my channel because this is for you. January. In January, I wasn't doing the whole New Year, New Me thing. I've never been a fan of that, and I've never been a big fan of New Year's resolutions. And it's not to say that I don't like setting goals. I do enjoy that, but I don't like this idea that the new year is somehow, from one day to the next, somehow we're in this entirely new life. I just like to think of the new year as a continuation of who I'm already becoming. And at the start of 2025, I genuinely felt ready, y'all. Ready for alignment, ready for momentum, ready for my business and my content to take off. And I was also ready for a relationship. Spoiler alert, it was not a good idea. And at the time, it had been 2 years since my divorce. Let's talk about this boyfriend I got. I was optimistic because things felt good. The conversation was good. He had vision and he said really thoughtful things. And I've always valued that. You know, growing up, the men in my life, in my family, my community, when they said something, they meant it. Their words had weight. Their intentions came with follow through. And I never grew up questioning whether I could rely on people or on men. And let me tell you, when I got older, I was in for a rude awakening. Apparently, my experience was the exception, not the rule. So when I found myself in another relationship where things sounded good, that felt familiar to me. It felt comfortable to me because who doesn't do what they say they're going to do? Why would you say it if you have no intention of doing it? I digress. I had this feeling in my stomach, but at this point I had not learned to trust that gut feeling. And what I didn't see yet is that I was repeating old patterns. I was once again dating potential, which you should never do. There were moments, yes, that should have registered. His relationship with his family was strained. He seemed like anxious all the time. He decided that he wanted to be in the army at the age of 33, which in itself wasn't a problem, but his situation was just erratic. And I kept asking myself, well, how can I just be supportive of what he's going through instead of asking myself, should I even be supportive in the first place? Because he had no problem siphoning my energy, my time, and my joy. Now, I wish I could say the relationship ended at the end of January. It did not. It was going to take me a few months to learn what I know now. The lesson I'm taking from January is that there's a difference between learning something and knowing something. I learned a lot of stuff after my divorce, but just because I learned all those lessons didn't mean that I automatically knew how to apply them. It would be months before I realized how to do that. February is usually my favorite month of the year. It's my birthday month, it's the shortest month of the year, it's Black History Month, and it's the month of love. February is hands down the best month of the year. But your girl was I was just feeling so emotionally heavy at the time. So I did do something to celebrate my birthday. I went to Nashville to celebrate with my sister. I ended up doing a photo shoot. And I also took this time to just recalibrate and decide, what do I want my word of the year to be and what do I want my emotion of the year to be? This is something I started doing a couple years ago. It doesn't mean that I don't set like actual goals and have timelines with them, but it helps me see, how do I want to move throughout the year with everything that I do? How do I want to grow throughout the year? And 2025 was the year of intention. And my 2025 emotion was fearless. I will share my 2026 word of the year and emotion of the year at the end of this video. I chose fearless as my emotion of the year because I realized that I was just afraid of failure. I was afraid that I was behind. I was afraid that moving back in with my parents the end of 2024, that somehow meant that I had messed up my life. I was afraid that my divorce meant that I had derailed my life, which is why I said, no, this year I want to be fearless. I want to vanquish my fears. That's how I think about fear. It's a spirit that needs to be vanquished. And so we want it to be very intentional, hence the word of the year, intentional, about doing that. I didn't want my past mistakes dictating my future decisions. There's this part of us that knows. Maybe it's divine intuition, maybe it's Holy Spirit, but it's a part of us that kind of knows what we need. And so I set this intention without realizing all the ways in which it would come true or all the ways in which I would be tested. March. I had some unexpected wins in March. My 9 to 5, because I do have a full-time job in addition to my content, that work really started to pick up. I got assigned to new projects. I started to feel like the work that I was doing was meaningful, which I hadn't really felt before. I felt like my talents were being kind of wasted, honestly, in my current role. But then I started to move into communications and marketing strategy. I started to consult with directors and executives. I was excited to be putting all of my skills to good use. Up until that point, work had always been kind of a means to an end for me. It felt like something I was enduring. So this was the first time where I asked myself, oh, could you do this? Like, even if your content and your business takes off, could you still work here and enjoy it? And I was kind of like, maybe, which before it was a resounding no. And that really surprised me because I had never thought about working for someone else in my life. My goal has always been to work for myself. So that was a huge shift in how I saw myself and how I saw my options at the time. By the end of March, I feel like my life was looking really solid on the outside anyway. You know, I was busy, I was dating, I was creating my content, I was moving in the right direction. And then April came. I went to go watch my boyfriend graduate from his basic training. We had been writing letters back and forth to each other for 11 weeks. He wrote me 24 letters. Like, how romantic is that? When he walked across that field, felt like, okay, see, this is proof. You were right to choose him. He did what he said he would. But you know, proof doesn't come from just like one completed goal. It is about consistency, stability over time. We didn't get to spend that much time together. He immediately went on to Virginia. And you know, I ended up going to Virginia as well. I thought we'd get to spend time together once I got there. I ended up just hanging out with one of my friends, and then I left a little bit early because he wasn't able to get away. And you know, at the time I brushed it off because I had to get ready for my trip to New York City. But looking back, I can see how often I was making adjustment after adjustment to my life, doing too much, and he was not matching that energy. So I flew from Virginia to New York to meet up with my best friend from Italy. I've known her for 10 years. And this was our second time doing New York City together. But this time was different. We still did tourist stuff. We did the Guggenheim and we did Top of the Rock, but I think I was just different. I was in a better mental space. I was more present, more settled, more myself. And I noticed I wasn't that way around boyfriend. Again, didn't notice it at the time, but in hindsight, it really is 2020. And while I was there, I posted my first video about the Plus Size Brand Bible, which is a shopping guide that I had put together with information on over 200 plus size brands to help plus size women shop smarter. And the video started taking off and it felt like, okay, momentum, things are happening, things are moving, our plan is working. I had hundreds of sales in the first month. Messages were pouring in. It was validating. It felt like, okay, you didn't think this was a big deal, but it is helping a lot of people. In that moment, it taught me to trust myself more, trust my ideas more, and just also make time to not only execute on an idea, but also to share it and to talk about it and to market it. Like, so often we'll have amazing business ideas or even content ideas. I can't tell you how many content ideas in 2025 went unfilmed or unposted just because I was like, oh, you know, I feel like the moment's passed, or I don't want to talk about it. Nobody's gonna care about it. Like, we have to stop telling ourselves those stories, those lies, because they're not true. So that was April. And then came May. I just really didn't do anything in May except work. 9 to 5, my business, my life. I was working. But I still did try to make time for family. I did a mother-daughter photo shoot with my mom and my sister. And I also went to a Mother's Day luncheon with my mom. That was just a good moment to pause and kind of remind myself like what's important. But if I'm being honest, May was also marked by a lot of frustration for me. Things were not going well with the relationship. I felt like boyfriend's communication had dwindled. And then I beat myself up about like spending too much money to go see him and be in New York City. And again, this is after I launched this book, had a great month of sales, but I was questioning why things weren't moving faster with the book. I was questioning why it wasn't like life-changing money coming in. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but looking back, y'all, I was being really ungrateful. I was focused so much on what wasn't happening in my life that it made it impossible for me to see all the many blessings I had already received. More on this later. And then there was June. June was Chicago. Chicago is my happy place. It's the place where I feel capable and accomplished and excited and happy and joyful. I just have all the feels. It's like one of my favorite cities. But it also made me feel like, okay, when I go to Chicago, I don't feel like a failure the way that I feel when I'm at my parents' in my room, or the way that I felt, because there's a shift coming. I was only in Chicago for a couple days, and I just remember spending the whole day out with my friends laughing. They are some of the funniest people I have ever met. And it was beautiful to have that moment with them. We tried out new restaurants, we tried out some new experiences, and it just reminded me that traveling or just like being in a new space is when I feel the most free. I've always felt that way. When I lived in Spain, when I lived in Switzerland, I always felt just free and like everything was possible. But after the mistakes that I made in 2023 and 2024, I told myself that I couldn't travel anymore. I needed to focus on my business. I needed to make more money. I needed to pay off my debt, and I needed to fix what I had broken, fix my mistakes. While it was a joyful trip, it also brought some clarity. There's that word again. I realized that I had been using Chicago kind of as an escape and a way to run away from building a life here in Indianapolis. And it's not because my life here is bad. I mean, hello, look around. It's not horrible. I'm staying with my parents. But it's because I hadn't fully reconciled with where I was in life yet. And that's the thing about the first half of 2025. Everything was moving, nothing was falling apart, but something inside me, I wasn't happy. Something was still aligning. I don't know what it was, but I just was not happy and I couldn't put my finger on it. July is where everything clicked with this guy. I don't know what it was. I think I just like stopped explaining all of his behavior away. So he told me he was going to be stationed in Germany, which not a big deal. I've done long distance relationships, like literally intercontinental relationships. With him planning, him getting ready to go to Germany, like yes, naturally, like communication things shifted and I was okay with that. But what I said to him was like, hey, because I've done this before, we need to be really intentional about our communication. I'd love to just like set up some time for us to talk about how we're going to communicate. That seems like a basic ask. Communication is not hard. It really doesn't have to be hard. And he never made time for that. And when he got to Germany, his communication dwindled even more. And he never took accountability. And as I noticed this, something became very clear to me. He did not like me. You know, I've heard women say that before, and I didn't fully understand what they meant. Because it's not about attraction or distance or stress. It's not about any of that. It is about effort. If he wanted to, he would, and it's true. The men in my life, they would never, ever treat me that way. Why would I let anybody treat me that way, let alone my boyfriend? And when I realized that, everything changed. He didn't even have the courage to just break it off with me to let me know his feelings had changed. It was like I could see what a coward he was. And I was like, girl, how could you ever date such a weak dude? And I hate to say it that way, but like, yes, that is cowardly behavior. So I broke up with him, and here's what surprised me the most. I was relieved. I even made a video celebrating the breakup. The women in the comments were so happy for me, and they were sharing their own experiences. And I hate that we've all had that moment in a sense, because it's like communication shouldn't be this hard. Dating shouldn't be this hard. In the way that I grew up, it wasn't portrayed as hard because my parents were very intentional about communication. They were very intentional about improving their relationship when they first got married. So by the time I was born, I'm the youngest of 4, they had it on lock. And I thought every relationship was like this. Absolutely not. I learned that I have to now date in a way that guards my heart and protects myself. And I have to be more patient to allow for discernment so that I don't confuse words with alignment. Being with that man was costing me, okay? Costing me money, time, energy. It's costing me a lot. And choosing myself restored me. And you know, speaking of restoration, later that month, I went to a family reunion on my dad's side, which I hadn't seen them in years. And the timing was not by accident. Being with my cousins, seeing the life that they've built, the careers, the businesses they have, the goals that they have, the places they've traveled, I was like, I can see myself in my cousins. It was so inspiring to see them. And what was even more eye-opening for me was the way in which they were so proud of me and all the things that I accomplished. I had been so focused on all the mistakes that I had made that I didn't realize how much it was blocking me and holding me down. For the first time in a long time, I was finally able to release that quiet feeling of failure that I'd been holding on to. You know, we are humans. We are going to make mistakes. But if you keep defining yourselves by the failures and the mistakes, then you will never give yourself yourself the space to succeed. So July, we let a lot of stuff go. July was a busy month. It was a chaotic month, but it was a great month. August. August brought with it even more lessons and more grounding. I went to my corporate headquarters for work, got to meet some of my newer colleagues, even got to talk and to network with some of the directors and executives that I had been supporting for the year. And one night, an executive took a few of us out to dinner, and it turned into one of those conversations you will probably never forget in your life. He was talking about the choices he had made, the life that he had lived, how he got to where he is in his career. I don't think I'd ever met somebody who was at that level that I want to be at in my career and still was balancing like family and hobbies, giving back, traveling, balancing all these things. But one thing that stuck out to me was to get there, he said he asked himself one question. He's like, if I looked at my life today, would I be happy with what I've built? Would I be happy with the way that I'm living it? And for him, the answer was yes. I asked myself that same question and the answer was no. The answer was no. And again, it's not because my life is bad. I'm not on here saying my life is bad, but it is because I had stopped living my life. I was so focused on correcting my mistakes, being successful, getting out of Indianapolis, getting back to Chicago. I was so focused on all of these things that I had stopped living my life. I know that I went to New York and I know I did all these things and I traveled, but if I was not outside of Indianapolis, which is where I spent most of my time, I was right here in my room working my tail off all the time. But that's not who I am. And it's not who any of us should be. Like, rest is not something that you have to earn. And I kept feeling like, well, once I get there, once I reach my goals, then I can start enjoying my life. And that conversation with him just made me realize I didn't want to reach my goals only to realize that I had forgotten to actually live my life. Whew, some powerful lessons this past summer. Let's move on to September. September felt like the answer to that realization. We got quicker, okay? We learned the lessons. We got quicker at applying them. So I traveled almost every weekend. This was an accident, to be honest. I am surrounded by Libras in my life. I know a lot of Libras, a lot of people who were born in September and October. So it was a lot of birthdays to celebrate. And it was great to just spend time with people who matter and to take my focus off of work. And in September, my best friend since preschool came to Indianapolis to visit me. Felt like I was coming home to myself. And that's not because all my problems disappeared, because they did not. But I could just tell I was changing. Like, my mindset about things was changing. I was becoming more patient. I was becoming more discerning. I was becoming more just gracious and compassionate with myself. And I was having more gratitude for how far I'd come. September was restorative. October. By October, I knew something had just really shifted in me. I just started to notice that I was living and like holding life differently. My perspective, my mindset about life was just different. And I got invited to the Ellie dinner in Chicago. And I gotta be honest, it almost felt a little bit like, how did this happen? Because my views have not been that great in 2025. My content, I don't think, has been that great in 2025. Like, what I used to do before wasn't really working this year. And to have 100,000 followers on Instagram and not even have a video get 10,000 views, kind of embarrassing. That's how I felt. I felt embarrassed. So getting invited to this Ellie dinner, it just made me realize and reminded me, you don't have to overfunction or be perfect or have all of the views and this external validation in order to be worthy of something great happening. I also had a really happy moment around my weight loss journey. So I dropped off a lot of clothes at Secondhand Curves in Chicago while I was there for the dinner. And I've lost about 90 pounds, but I didn't really share a lot of that journey online because, well, people are mean to plus size women for existing, for losing weight or not, for being happy. People are just mean to plus size women. So I really wanted to take the time to work on my relationship with myself and with food and with my body on my own. And I just need to say this one thing because I feel like it needs to be said. Losing weight is the least interesting thing about me. Like, I speak multiple languages. I've lived in multiple countries. I have done so much in my life. And I can honestly say the least interesting thing about it is gonna be my weight loss. November. November is where everything started to align for me. All of the lessons, all of the growth, all of the experiences started to align. And it started with a family friend of mine. He's older, like older than my dad. And he just wanted to talk to me. He wanted to share his career journey. He worked at the same company that I now work for. And he was the first Black person in a lot of his roles. He paved the way for a lot of people in that company. So he was sharing his career journey, and he told me that he had gotten to a point where he realized he was idolizing his career and his ambition. And that took me for a loop, because I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing you could idolize. Like, what do you mean? I'm working hard. I'm out here getting it done. I'm out here trying to achieve my goals. I'm doing what I gotta do. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily anything I was doing that was wrong. It was actually my heart and my mentality about it that was so wrong. I had gotten to a point where I was just moving without God at all. Like, I wasn't considering him. I was like, God, this is what I'm doing. Get on board. I literally said that in 2024. I was like, this is the plan. Let's go. And I thought that was me having faith, but no, that was me being just like super prideful. I realized I had taken things into my own hands and had stepped out of alignment with God. And I'd been attending a church in Indianapolis for about a year up to that point. And so when he said these things, it was like everything, again, just clicking. Everything was clicking. I realized that I had been very angry with God. That wasn't actually new to me. I knew that I had been angry with God, but I was content like sitting in that anger. And a lot of that came from my divorce, and I let that anger pull me away from God. And it's crazy that I was mad at him when these are all choices that I made. Like, but I think it was just easier to be mad at God and angry at God than to face my own choices. And I would say that rekindling my relationship with Jesus Christ is the single greatest accomplishment of my year in 2025. And I'm getting back to that moment where I can hear what he's telling me. I can see how he's moving in my life and how he's directing me. And with that came this like renewed sense of identity and clarity. Again, there's that word about my life in general, and especially just about the next steps in my life. We're not done yet. In November, I also joined my parents' podcast. I had helped them launch the podcast earlier this year, and I decided to join it in November to just bring a different perspective. I'm younger, I have been married and divorced, and I'm also dating. So I know what a lot of us are going through right now. So it's been really great to merge their like timeless wisdom with my lived experiences. November was a busy month. I went back to Mississippi. If you don't know, that is where I'm from. That is where I spent 20 years of my life. My friend invited me to a gala, and I stayed with another friend who I hadn't really talked to in a long time, but there wasn't like anything wrong with our relationship. We just hadn't spoken in a while, but she was totally fine with me staying with her. And it was great to just see, even when you're so far apart from people, your life can still be so aligned. That's when you know that you have the right people in your life. You're aligned with your values, you're aligned with your lifestyle, you're aligned with your vision for your future. So it doesn't matter how long you go without talking. You pick back up right where you left off. And towards the end of my trip, this is the last thing, y'all, from November. So a few years ago, I had a falling out with a friend that I'd known since preschool, and it was my decision to ultimately like close the door and end the relationship. And while I was in Mississippi, I just heard she was going through a difficult time, and it was just like something clicked, and everything that had happened before, everything we'd been through before, it just all didn't seem to matter anymore. And I'm not saying that what happened wasn't significant or important, but it's like, man, time has passed. Like, I feel like she needs me right now. I went to go see her, and we talked about everything, and we restored that relationship. The forgiveness was easy for both of us. And I go back again to align lifestyles, align values with people. Like, you're able to have these difficult conversations. This is why it's so important. December. Everything that happened this past year was internal. And sometimes those are the hardest battles that we go through, because it was a heavy year for me. And I think it was a heavy year for a lot of people. Like 2025, we've been through a lot politically, socially, emotionally. People are overwhelmed and people are really struggling right now. So by the time December came around, I just knew that I didn't want my content to be about consumption. I didn't want my content to be the same old, like, here's cute outfits for Christmas, for New Year's. I still did some of that. that, but I really wanted to focus on giving back to my audience and to my community in December and just in general in my life. So I did 8 days of holiday giveaways, and I also went to Chicago to bring some toys and volunteer for my friend's toy drive, Gifts for Guardians. Over 300 families came. It was also a really good reminder that I don't have to be in the best place in my life or where I want to be in life to start helping people. Like, I know we feel like the protagonists of our life, and in a way that we are, but our life is not the only one out here. And with everything going on, this is definitely a time to lean into community. It's a time to lean into the people who care about you and the people you care about. I got one more thing to share about December. There was a new guy, okay? Notice the past tense. We have been talking for about 2 weeks, but again, I learned my lessons. I was taking things slowly. I wasn't chasing, I was applying all the lessons that I had learned. Everything felt fine. So the day before our first date, which just so happened to be in Chicago, he lives there. I was there for my friend's toy drive. He told me that he was going to DC for a Howard game. I thought it sounds fun. He traveled a lot. He would often call me from the airport, so it didn't seem unusual. But something told me to look up the game. I don't know if it was Holy Spirit. It was something in my gut. And remember, January, we didn't listen to our gut about Guy, but this is December. And we're like, oh yeah, no, these gut feelings, we're listening to them. Holy Spirit, we're listening. And it turns out not only was this Howard game not in DC, it was in North Carolina, there were no other games in DC. And I was just like, well, that was a bold-faced lie. That was such a small thing to lie about too. So if he's gonna lie about something this small, what else could he be lying about? So I decided to Google him. Now, before you get on me, you're like, you should have Googled him. That should have been the first thing you do. But as someone who shares their life publicly online, I have come across guys when they have my social or they reach out to me via social, they start to confuse getting to know me with what they see online versus actually getting to know me, the person. And I don't like that. So I didn't want to do the same thing to him. But I was like, nah, girl, you got to Google him. I Google him and his photo comes up from LinkedIn. Okay, great, true, yeah, real. Then right next to that photo is one of those, are we dating the same guy post? And the first line says, beware of this man. And I was like, oh my gosh. Apparently he had been lying to many women about what he does. And not only that, he was having unprotected sex with multiple women. Now this was all in the post, but you know it's really bad when you go to the comments. And there were like 5, 6 women in the comments who were like, yeah, he tried that with me. Or I'm so glad I saw this post. The ladies had nothing good to say about him. So I made up an excuse, told him I had a family emergency, had to run back to Indianapolis, and I never talked to him again. I do want to just caveat really quick. I hate ghosting. I'm not a fan of it. There is one case for ghosting, and that is when, as a woman, I feel like my personal safety is at risk. And I really did, because for someone who could lie so easily and so boldly, and for someone who is being reckless, that to me is a dangerous person who is capable of anything. So I absolutely did ghost him. He reached out like a couple times after that, but I think he knew. And I haven't heard from him since. But I'm so proud of myself because, again, we learned our lessons. I didn't feel sad about that. I felt very calm. I felt thankful that I was saved from that date. Do not blame yourself when this stuff happens, by the way. People have gotten very good at pretending to be somebody they're not. Be patient, practice discernment. That's it. I spent Christmas with my family. We had a great time, and that was my year. So now when I look back on 2025 though, I don't see failures. I really don't even see mistakes. I see steps. I watched the Giannis Antetokounmpo documentary on Prime. If y'all haven't seen it, it's really good. Throughout the documentary, he says, there are no failures. Everything is a step to success. And that is what I see now in 2025. I see steps. I see God gently redirecting me. I see protection. And I see so much to be thankful for. I told you earlier that I would share my 2026 word of the year and emotion of the year. 2026 is my year of giving. Give more of my time to people who need it. I want to give myself more grace when I make mistakes. I want to give my life over to God more fully, and I want to give myself space to try new things and have some failures so I can learn some more lessons. And the emotion I'm moving with in 2026 to allow me to do all of these things is compassion. I'm learning how to live without proving, how to rest without guilt, to love without fear, to choose presence, people, and purpose over performance. God has some really big plans for me, and he's got some really big plans for you too. And we don't need to rush them. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I am chasing what's next. And that lesson, that growth, that is worth everything that I've been through in 2025. What about you? How are you wanting to move differently in 2026? What are some of your goals? I would love to hear about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with a friend who could use this message, and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.